All right, class. So I'm going to make a video to kind of catch us up on some stuff that I didn't quite get to, and maybe emphasize some more stuff about what we did. So I'm going to start with where we were on Ruby. So Ruby is the first language we're going to program in, and Ruby and Python are very, very similar. So I kind of changed things over so it's Ruby, C, and Prolog. But if you want to do Python again, just let me know and I'll put some extra Python stuff, maybe some extra videos for you to do that. So Ruby was designed by a computer programmer to do stuff really that programmers do all the time and make it really shortcuts. And so I thought, well, they need a little easy break because the other stuff with the C and the Prolog we're going to do over these weeks is going to be a little bit tough. So let's go with Ruby because that makes life easy. And so we talked about the tradition among computer scientists ever since Brian Kernighan and C is the first thing you write in a new programming language is hello world. So today what we did was we went to our IDE 1. IDE stands for our integrated development environment. That's the place where you write your stuff and tell it to run. That's the IDE. Scratch, this is the IDE. This is the IDE for Scratch. They didn't call it that. It's kind of a fancy name now that you know you've been working in an IDE if you worked in Scratch. So IDE 1 is your simple web-based place to do this. So I'm going to go to New Code. Now when you go to New Code, always check. It likes to go to Java first. Check to make sure you're programming in the language you think you're programming in, because it will be unhappy if you don't. I have made that mistake. This little thing that says your code goes here, that's a comment with that little symbol in front of it. It means the computer will ignore it. So you could just put, this is my lovely hello world, if that's what floats your boat. All right, and now we're gonna go down here, and the nice thing about Ruby is it's very simple. Puts is going to put it to output, put a space, and hello world. All right, and now to make it run, to make it execute my program, now I've written the program, this is my code, this is my source code, I'm going to click IDE 1. IDE 1, it just means run the program, or I could hit Control Enter. All right. It gave me success. It didn't do an error. And standard out says hello world, which is what I wanted, right? Now I can edit it again. We can show you what happens when we don't do things exactly right. If I get that wrong, we go down here, IDE 1 it. It's compiling. We'll talk about what compiling is a little bit. Runtime error. Okay, so now I have to go back and fix it. When I go back and fix it, that's called debugging. Okay, but we're going to put the puts back. I'm going to IDE 1 it just to check and make sure it's running correctly. Success, hello world, very good. And I'm going to save it. Now, when it saved the program, it doesn't give me a good thing, but it's up here in my codes. And I haven't really figured out how to change the names for it, but what I just do is I put a note. Ruby. It tells me it's in Ruby anyway. Hello world. So over here, it tells you it's in Ruby anyway. And it tells you the date. So, okay. So, and there's different things you can do with it. All right. So let's do, now we did a second one. I have them ready over here in my codes. So the second one we did, there is a link to, this in your assignment, and there's also a copy and paste. So what I recommend you do is just copy and paste it into a new code thing. There's text. If you go to PowerSchool Learning and you go to your assignment, and you click on that assignment, you can just copy this. Copy that, paste it, and put it in a new thing on IDE 1. So let me just do that for you, just the way you would do it. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go to IDE 1. I'm going to do new code. I'm going to make, it's Ruby, very good. I don't need that comment this time, so I'm just going to paste it right over the top of it. All right, look at that. And now when I hit IDE 1, it should, fingers crossed, it should run. It's running, success. And I will look down here at my standard out, ARF and Sparky. Okay, now why is he saying ARF and Sparky? Because we didn't quite get that far in class. The class of a good dog, oops, this is called the class definition. From here, from line 1 to line 12 is the class definition. The class has a name, which is a good dog, and it has a function called initialize the name. @name is a variable that is accessible inside the dog. The good dog knows his name. And initialize is going to set whatever you send in those parentheses to the name. Okay, so we've initialized a variable. That variable is the name of our dog. So the dog now knows his name is Sparky when we made a Sparky. He also has some things he can do. And notice these are verbs. He can speak, and when he speaks, his behavior is ARF. He can also get his name, and what he'll do is he'll return his name. Now he needs this special function to get his name. Objects to keep security. It's kind of like you don't give out your personal information on the internet. Objects in object-oriented programming don't give out their personal information unless you ask them with Simon Says. And to ask them with Simon Says is to know the name of the function that will tell you their name. So if you go up to Sparky and say, tell me your name, he's not going to tell you his name because that's not the Simon Says. The Simon Says is I have to say Sparky.getName. Then he will give me back his name. That's a security feature. You don't tell anybody your name unless they have the secret code. That's, so you don't tell anybody any of your variables. If I have a variable for how many legs Sparky has, he's not going to tell anybody that until they have the special Simon Says of what that function is to tell them what that name is. Okay, so this is a class definition. In class, I'm about to run out of time, so we'll split this over two things. In class, we talked about comparing this to Scratch. You don't have to do anything in Scratch for this class, but I will frequently compare it to Scratch because a lot of people have had familiarity with it and it's very visual. So we had this sprite called Fred. Now in Scratch, a sprite is an object. That object has variables. A variable is a place where we store a value and we give it a name. So it's kind of confusing, but we named this thing name. So this is using the variable. I have him say his name, but before he says his name, I have to set that name equal to something. I set that name equal to Fred. That is called initializing the variable. Okay. He also has, Fred also has some behaviors. At the startup, he goes to a certain location. So if I have him move around every time I click this flag and it runs startup, he's going to go to that location and he's going to set his name to Fred, right? So that's startup. That's setting everything up that I need to be set up at the beginning each time so that every time I start the same way. So that is here. Then the next thing he's going to do is speak. That is to say ARF. He's going to wait 1 second, and then he's going to say his name. So that is using the variable. So using the variable. So notice when he says, when I say name, he doesn't say name, he says Fred. Why does he say Fred? Because it's the value that's inside that variable. All right, so I'm going to have to continue this to the next one.